Each year, defense experts at the Heritage Foundation take a deep assessment of the various branches of the U.S. military. The result? A highly regarded report card known as the Index of U.S. Military Strength.
It's a way for us to convey to the American public, to taxpayers, basically what they're getting for their money and whether or not the military is well postured to defend the country against threats and to defend U.S. interests around the world.
To sum up this year's findings, things aren't trending in the right direction.
Unfortunately, here in this latest edition, the 2022, we're starting to see declines again in readiness, certainly sacrificing of end strength or the size of the forces to pay for these things. And these budgets, a national budget that's in a continuing resolution, it really makes it hard to sustain the programs needed to keep people trained, keep current equipment ready, and replace old equipment as it's leaving service.
In the grading, the Army comes in at marginal, seen as aging faster than it is modernizing. A similar rating for the Navy, although it's trending to weak, due to the combination of a desperate need for a bigger fleet and lack of funding to make that happen. The Marine Corps scores highest at strong, and the Air Force and New Space Force are at the bottom with weak ratings. As for U.S. nuclear capability, it's on the higher end with a warning, strong trending to marginal. Defense expert Dakota Wood, editor of the index, says these scores also take into account the Biden administration's current priorities.
There's been a lot more talk and policy guidance out of the White House on combating climate change and global warming, gender and racial equity, diversity, equity, inclusion is kind of the term of art from the administration, those sorts of things. And there is about making sure that the military is actually combat ready.
We've worn out everything we've got in 2 decades of war in the Middle East. And we've got to start not just rebuilding, but we've got to start modernizing to get those cyber and artificial intelligence capabilities to fight these wars of the future. They're going to look so different from what we've done in the past.
Key adversaries, meanwhile, are investing in defense at a breakneck pace. Their current perception of the U.S. doing nothing to slow them down.
Using the withdrawal from Afghanistan as an example, the perception is the United States is incompetent. They rushed to do things in kind of a backwards sort of way, removing your military forces before removing your own citizens. And so this bungling had Beijing and Moscow and Tehran and Pyongyang thinking maybe the United States has really lost a step here.
American allies seem to feel the same.
Israeli leaders, Arab leaders that I talk to, everybody in the region, and you see it all over the world, they don't believe that Biden has the strength. Set aside his physical condition, which is an open question. They don't think he has the strength of will, of character perhaps, of resolve to take on Putin and the Chinese and the Iranians.
Joel Rosenberg, editor-in-chief of All Israel News, tells CBN the Middle East is watching and worried.
What I think everybody in this region is worrying about is what if Putin and, President Xi in Beijing and the supreme leader of Iran decide no one's going to stop us. Let's go get what we want. That's the big X factor in 2022.
With resources spread out across the globe, Wood says our military is stretched too thin to respond to multiple conflicts at once. He believes the key to turning things around is funding.
Any reasonable person would say the current budget of $740 billion is a lot of money, and it absolutely is. But when the increase in the budget from this year compared to last is 1.8%, and we saw an annual inflation rate of 7%, you're not even keeping pace with the cost of buying stuff like it's fuel or medical supplies.
Representative Mike Rogers, the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, says defense spending needs to be increased to a minimum of 3% over the rate of inflation for the foreseeable future.
This is going to be like a decade-long process that we're going to have to keep making these investments to get these capabilities that we're going to need to keep ourselves free and safe. Because I tell people all the time, it doesn't matter if your social security system's solvent if you're dead, and there's people in this world that want to kill us.
One investment Rogers is urging the president to pursue: nuclear modernization efforts. Biden has a review on this area expected later this month, and there's concern he'll make cuts rather than improvements, a move Rogers fears will invite further aggression from our enemies. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
We are declining and declining rapidly, and it's not just in the eyes of Russia and China and Iran, North Korea. We're declining in the eyes of our own allies. The spokesman for the South Korean military told BBC that America's strength is declining as we speak. He wouldn't be authorized to say that unless that was the thought pattern in the highest echelons of the South Korean military. They're our most staunchest ally in Asia. And for them to be saying that, they're looking at a vacuum of leadership, and what do they do? North Korea is just across the border. What do they do in light of that? Ukraine's come to the realization that the United States is not going to move in militarily. They're literally preparing for trench warfare in a modern warfare scenario, which is horrific to think about. But that's the state. We have NATO wondering what's our future. Germany openly breaking with the administration over responses to Russia. These are all happening because of our perceived weakness. And our weakness isn't just in military capability, as that report just pointed out. It's also weakness in our politics, where people around the world understand we're fundamentally divided. And again, a house divided cannot stand. But let me add to it. What are we spending our money on? And when you look at these various programs, we're spending our money on ourselves and on consumption, as opposed to shoring up our military or making sure our finances are in good order. This whole new money theory that we get to spend unlimited amounts on whatever we want is going to come up empty at some point in time. We've now passed 30 trillion in a deficit. As interest rates ratchet up, our interest payments on our debt are going to exceed the amount of money that we spend on our military. This is unsustainable, and we have to wake up to it. All of us do, because who is asking for these stimulus payments? Who is looking for the government for some kind of handout or bailout or whatever? We've got to come and say, this isn't sustainable long term. How do we shore up what we need to shore up, stop this inflationary cycle, stop the government borrowing, and pay attention to our borders, pay attention to our military, and how can we be strong again? That's going to be tough to do. And unfortunately, we've gotten so weak and so divided politically, we can't even come to agreement on the basics.